We are KB and Jasmine, and welcome to Beyond the Silver Screen.
Welcome to the deep dive. You ready to dive in?
Always.
Awesome. Today we're going deep into the world of Denis Villeneuve's films.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah, you probably know him from like Arrival or Blade Runner 2049, but we're going way beyond those, just scratching the surface.
Yellowly.
We're going to unearth his style, his recurring themes, and how he brings these big ideas like identity, technology, all that to life on the screen.
It's fascinating, because when we look at Villeneuve's work, we're not just watching individual films. It's like we're exploring this whole cinematic universe.
Ooh, I like that.
It's like his signature woven through every single frame.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a secret code, right? These hidden patterns that connect his films.
Right, exactly.
And speaking of codes, one of the articles you sent me, it calls Villeneuve a macrophage.
Oh, yeah.
I have to admit, I was like, what? I can't wait to dig into that.
We will.
But first, let's rewind a bit. So he's a Quebec filmmaker, right?
He is, yeah.
So how does that background, that Quebec cinema scene, how does that influence his work?
Well, Quebec cinema has a really rich history, but it's known for this very specific style, documentary realism.
Okay.
Very serious, gritty, often focused on like social issues.
So Villeneuve's kind of like breaking the mold.
Yeah, you could say that. And early on, it caused a little friction.
Oh, really?
Some critics found his narratives, let's say, a bit lighter compared to the gravitas of earlier Quebec cinema.
Yeah, yeah.
Some even used the word superficial.
Wow, okay, superficial. It's
a harsh word.
That's a bit hard. So what was it about his style that was so different?
Well, Villeneuve, he embraces these elements like magical realism and something that film theorists call ludism.
Ludism, okay.
It's this, think playful, experimental, almost like fairy tales woven into the films.
Okay, interesting.
That's not something you typically find in traditional Quebec cinema, which is, as I said, very grounded in reality.
Gotcha. So maybe that's where the whole macrophages thing comes in?
It could be, yeah.
Can you explain that for our listener? Because it sounds a little intense.
It is, but it's a really cool analogy. So one film critic used this term, this macrophage, to describe how Villeneuve uses close-ups.
Okay.
Think about what a macrophage does. It engulfs and breaks down these foreign substances.
Okay.
So the close-up becomes this all-consuming element in his films.
I see. So it's not just about seeing the character's face. It's like we're feeling what they're feeling.
Exactly. It goes beyond visuals. It's what film theorists call an image affection. It provokes a visceral response in the viewer.
Yeah.
It's not just observation. You're experiencing those emotions with the characters.
Right. Can you give us like a specific example of how this works in one of his films?
Sure. So think about Polytechnic.
Okay.
He uses these long close-ups on the shooter's face.
Okay.
But his expression, it's blank, almost void of emotion.
And what kind of effect does that create?
It creates this chilling sense of detachment. It makes you question his motivations, what's going on behind that mask.
Yeah.
And he does something similar in Incendies with extended close-ups on vacant faces. It builds tension and this mystery around the character's past traumas.
It's amazing how a technique like a simple close-up can be so powerful.
Right.
And have so many layers.
Exactly. It's the beauty of diving deep.
Totally agree. Now, I noticed a recurring theme of motherhood in the material you provided.
Oh, yes.
It's not your typical, like, sentimental portrayal, though.
No, not at all.
It's different.
Motherhood in Villeneuve's films, it's often presented as a response to trauma or a crisis.
Interesting.
Less about those idealized notions of motherhood and more about the raw, complex realities women face.
I mean, that makes sense. Could you give the listener some examples of how this plays out in his films?
Sure. Take Simone in Un Tritu Utsurta. Her longing for a child, it's triggered by this near-fatal car accident.
Oh, wow.
Then there's Bibiane in Maelstrom, struggling with an existential crisis after an abortion. And then in Incendies, we have Mawal. Her pregnancy unfolds amidst the horrors of the Lebanese civil war.
So it's like motherhood, but intertwined with loss, pain, and the search for meaning in the middle of all this chaos?
Exactly. And there's this recurring image, this hopeful womb that appears in many of his films. It's this idea that a child represents the potential for a better future.
Right. But at the same time, these mothers they're tied to the past, right?
Right.
Their experiences shape how they approach motherhood. Honestly, I think it's a much more realistic portrayal of motherhood than what we typically see in films.
I think so too. And that complexity, I think, is one of the things that makes Villeneuve's work so compelling.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, another theme that we see in his films is the question of identity.
Yes, definitely.
And I think that's especially interesting given his background as a Quebec filmmaker, right?
Absolutely.
Because Quebec has this unique cultural landscape, always, navigating its identity within Canada.
Right, yeah.
This distinct language, culture, history. And I feel like this struggle for identity is like mirrored in so many of Villeneuve's characters.
It is, it is.
Can you give the listener some specific examples of that?
Sure, think of Noel's children in Incendies. They're on this journey to uncover their mother's past, but in doing so, they have to confront their own identities.
Right.
Or look at Louise Banks in Arrival. Her experience with this alien language, it completely transforms her understanding of time and her sense of the self.
Wow. So it's not just personal identity, it's cultural, historical, like all these layers.
Yeah, all these layers that shape who we are.
And that search for identity, it's often tied to uncovering like these hidden truths,
Yeah,
grappling with history, ultimately finding a sense of belonging.
it,
And speaking of these journeys of self-discovery, Villeneuve's science fiction films like Arrival and Blade Runner 2049, they really take that exploration of identity and technology to another level.
they do, yeah. They raise these really profound questions about, what it means to be human in a world that's increasingly dominated by technology.
Like in Arrival, it's not just about, communicating with aliens.
Right.
It's the language itself reshapes Louise's perception of time and her place in the world.
It really does.
It's mind-bending.
Absolutely. And in Blade Runner 2049, that line between human and replicant, it becomes so blurred that it forces us to reconsider like what truly defines humanity. Are we just our memories or our biology or something more?
Right, right. It's like he's holding up this mirror to our anxieties about AI and how fast technology is advancing.
He is, and he doesn't give us easy answers. He wants us to wrestle with these complex questions, consider the consequences of our choices.
Before we move on to some specific examples from his films, I want to touch on one more concept that I found really intriguing. The idea of fantasy objects.
Oh, yes, those are fascinating.
It sounds like something out of a dream.
Right, right.
But it's actually it's a really insightful way to understand how Villeneuve creates a sense of longing and absence in his films.
Absolutely.
So these fantasy objects, they're characters that are constantly referenced, but they never actually appear on screen.
Right, they're almost like ghosts from the past.
Yeah, like their presence is felt even though they're not physically there.
Right, exactly.
Can you give our listeners some examples of that?
Sure. Think of Bibiane's missing mother in Maelstrom.
Okay.
She is a constant presence in Bibiane's thoughts and dreams, but we never actually see her. In Incendies, the unknown father and brother, they're central to the twins' quest for identity.
Yeah.
But they remain elusive throughout the whole film.
Right, right.
And in Arrival, Louise's daughter, even though she's present in the flash forward, she's already gone on the present timeline.
Yeah, yeah.
It adds this layer of melancholy and loss to the story.
It's so fascinating how these absent figures, they actually shape the narratives,
They do.
It creates this void, this sense of longing that the characters and even the audience is constantly trying to fill.
Exactly. It makes us question, how does the past influence the present?
Mm-hmm.
How do the people we've lost continue to shape our lives?
Yeah, even in their absence, it's a powerful reminder that those who are gone can still have a profound impact on our stories.
Absolutely.
And you know what? This idea of absence, it actually connects back to Villeneuve's portrayal of motherhood, too.
Oh, how so?
Like, think about it. The hopeful womb, it represents a future that hasn't happened yet.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But these absent figures, they represent a past that we can never fully grasp.
That's a great observation.
It's this interplay of presence and absence, of hope and loss.
And it highlights, how interconnected Villeneuve's themes are, how they weave together to create this tapestry of meaning.
And it makes me think about, how much his personal and cultural background influences the stories he tells.
Right.
This sense of longing, the search for identity, the exploration of trauma, they're all woven into the fabric of his work.
They are, and understanding a director's background, I think it can give you a deeper appreciation for their artistic choices.
Definitely.
And in Villeneuve's case, I think it helps us understand why his films resonate so deeply with audiences.
Yeah.
He's not just entertaining us, he's inviting us to explore the human condition in all its complexity.
It's making me want to rewatch all of his films with a whole new perspective.
That's what we hope to achieve with these deep dives, to spark that curiosity, that desire to engage with art on a deeper level.
I think we've laid a really solid foundation in this first part of our deep dive.
Yeah, definitely.
We've explored Villeneuve's roots, the power of his close-ups, these recurring themes that make his work so distinct.
Right. And remember, as you watch his films, pay attention to those details. Notice those close-ups. Consider the symbolism. Ask yourself, how do your own experiences shape how you're interpreting the stories?
Exactly, because film is a two-way street. It's not just about the director telling a story. It's about how you, the viewer, connect with it.
Right.
And in Villeneuve's films, there's always more to discover.
Always. Okay, so ready to dive into some specific examples from Villeneuve's films?
Let's do it.
All right, so remember how we were talking about ludism, those playful, experimental elements he weaves into his work?
Yeah, I remember.
Well, let's talk about Maelstrom.
Okay, yeah, Maelstrom. That's the one with the talking fish.
That's the one.
Definitely not your typical movie narrative.
No, not at all. But I'm guessing there's more to it than just, a quirky stylistic choice.
Oh, for sure.
Villeneuve is a master of using symbolism.
Yeah.
To enrich his narratives. And the fish in Maelstrom, that's a great example. It dies multiple times throughout the film.
Oh, right, yeah.
And each death, it's marked by this gruesome close-up. He loves those close-ups.
He does. So, but the fish keeps coming back, right? Narrating different parts of Bibi Ann's story.
Right. So what does that tell us? What do you think?
I mean, it's transcending death, right?
Exactly.
Defying the natural order.
It plays into this theme of transcending mortality that runs through a lot of his films.
Yeah.
The fish becomes the symbol of the enduring power of stories. Even after death, the narrative persists. It makes you think about how stories connect us, how they outlive us.
Wow, that's pretty profound. It's definitely adding like a whole new layer to my understanding of that film.
And that's the beauty of diving deep, right?
Yeah, for sure.
To uncover these hidden layers that you might not have noticed on the surface.
Definitely. Okay, speaking of uncovering hidden layers, let's talk about Sicario.
Oh, yes, Sicario.
That film is it's a masterclass in suspense.
It is.
But it also it delves into some really complex moral questions.
Absolutely. One of the things that makes Sicario so compelling is that it blurs the lines between good and evil.
Right.
You have these characters working for the DEA, ostensibly the good guys, but their methods are brutal, morally ambiguous.
You find yourself questioning, like, are they any better than the cartel members they're trying to take down?
Exactly, and it forces you to confront the messy realities of the war on drugs.
Right.
Where there are no easy answers, no clear-cut heroes and villains. It's like that old saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Oh, so true. And this moral ambiguity, it's reflected in the characters themselves, too, right?
Right.
Like Matt, the CIA officer, he seems so like stoic and by the book at first.
Yeah.
But as the mission unfolds, you see these glimpses of his darker side.
You do. It's almost like he enjoys the violence he's orchestrating.
Yeah.
He compartmentalizes, tries to justify his actions.
But it leaves you with this uneasy feeling.
It does.
And then there's Alejandro, the hitman.
Oh, Alejandro.
He's so enigmatic.
He is.
But his brutality, it's almost operatic.
It is. He's driven by revenge, but there's also this sense of honor in his code, which makes him even more complex.
Yeah, you can't easily categorize him as simply good or evil.
No, you can't.
He operates in this moral gray area, which is something we see like a lot in Villeneuve's characters, right?
It is.
And then you have Kate, the FBI agent who's caught in the middle of all of that.
Yeah. She starts out so idealistic, believing in justice, due process, but the reality of the situation, it disillusions her.
Her journey is like a representation of lost innocence.
It is.
She realizes that the world, it doesn't operate in black and white.
Right.
And that even the best intentions can lead to devastating consequences.
Absolutely. And that theme of unintended consequences, it actually connects back to what we were discussing earlier about identity.
Oh, interesting.
In Prisoners, for example, we see how grief and the desire for revenge can transform a seemingly ordinary man into something monstrous.
Right. The father, he kidnaps and tortures the man he believes is responsible for his daughter's disappearance. He becomes so consumed by his need for answers, for retribution,
Right.
that he loses sight of his own morality.
He does. And it makes you think, how far would you go to protect the people you love?
Yeah.
Where do you draw the line?
It's a chilling exploration of how trauma can warp our perceptions.
It is. And it also raises questions about, the dangers of vigilantism.
Mm.
The idea that justice, when taken into our own hands, can become twisted.
Yeah.
It's a theme that Villeneuve revisits in a lot of his films.
Okay, speaking of twisted, let's talk about Enemy.
Oh, Enemy. That film really gets under your skin.
It does. It's a psychological thriller that plays with this idea of duality, doppelgangers, the fragility of identity.
Right. You have Adam, the history professor, and Anthony, the actor, identical in appearance, but they lead completely different lives.
Yeah. And the film never explicitly tells you if they're two separate people
Right.
or different facets of the same personality. It's like, are we just a collection of different selves? What makes us who we are?
Exactly. It's a film that demands active participation from the viewer.
For sure.
You're constantly searching for clues, trying to make sense of the symbolism,
Yeah.
and ultimately, you coming to your own interpretation.
And that ending with the giant spider,
Oh, yeah, the spider.
talk about unsettling imagery. What do you think Villeneuve is trying to convey with that?
Well, it's open to interpretation, of course.
Sure.
But I think the spider, it represents the anxieties and fears that lurk beneath the surface of our seemingly ordinary lives.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this manifestation of these dark primal instincts that we try to suppress.
It definitely leaves you with a sense of unease, like something sinister is lurking just out of sight.
It does, and it circles back to this idea that things aren't always what they seem.
Yeah.
There's more to the world and to ourselves than meets the eye.
And thinking back to those recurring themes we discussed earlier, the spider could also be seen as a metaphor for motherhood.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, spiders, I mean, they're often associated with creation, nurturing,
Yeah.
but also with danger and entrapment.
Right, right.
And that duality, it resonates with Villeneuve's portrayal of motherhood.
That's a really insightful connection.
It's a source of hope and potential,
Yeah.
but also a source of anxiety, even fear.
It shows how multi-layered Villeneuve's symbolism is.
Yeah.
His images operate on multiple levels. He invites us to engage with them on our own terms.
It's like he's giving us the pieces of a puzzle, but he doesn't tell us how to put them together.
Exactly.
It's up to us to make sense of the bigger picture.
And that's part of what makes his films so rewarding.
Yeah.
They challenge you to think critically, to engage with the material,
Yeah.
come to your own conclusions.
It's definitely a more active way of watching films than just passively consuming a story.
It is. Villeneuve's films, they're an invitation to a dialogue,
Right.
a conversation between the filmmaker and the viewer.
So we've explored some of the darker, more psychologically intense aspects of Villeneuve's work.
We have.
But he also delves into some really profound and hopeful themes,
Right.
particularly in his science fiction films.
You're right. His films aren't just about despair and dystopia.
Yeah.
They offer these glimpses of hope, of human connection and resilience, even when faced with overwhelming odds.
And Arrival is a perfect example of that, right?
It is. It's a film that, on the surface, seems like it's about this alien encounter.
Yeah.
But at its core, it's about so much more than that.
Right. It's about communication, understanding the power of human connection to overcome, fear and division.
Exactly.
And the way Villeneuve uses language is this bridge between humans and these extraterrestrials. It's brilliant.
It is, yeah.
It makes you realize how much our perceptions of the world are shaped by the way we communicate.
Absolutely. The alien language in Arrival, it's not just a way of exchanging information. It's a way of seeing the world differently, of understanding time and causality in a whole new way. And that transformation, that's what allows Louise, the linguist, to break through these barriers of fear and mistrust that threaten to plunge the world into chaos.
It's such a powerful message about the importance of empathy and understanding, especially in a world that often feels, increasingly divided.
It is, yeah. And this theme of communication also ties back to what we were discussing earlier about identity.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, the way we communicate, it shapes not only how we see the world, but also how we see ourselves. In Arrival, Louise's ability to communicate with the aliens, it fundamentally changes her understanding of her own identity,
Yeah.
her place in the world, even her relationship with time.
Right. And that makes you realize that identity isn't this fixed, static thing.
Right.
It's constantly evolving through our interactions with others, through the ways we communicate and connect.
Exactly. And this idea of identity as this fluid, evolving concept, it's explored even further in Blade Runner 2049.
You're right. In that film, the replicants are constantly questioning their own existence, searching for meaning and purpose in a world that treats them as less than human.
Right, and their quest for identity is so closely tied to their memories,
Right.
which may or may not be real.
Right.
It raises these profound questions about what makes us who we are. Do our memories define us, or do we have the power to transcend our programming and create our own destinies?
Right. Right. And Cade, the replicant protagonist, he embodies that struggle.
Yeah.
He's searching for answers, for a connection to something larger than himself. And his journey ultimately leads him to make this selfless sacrifice.
It does.
For a cause he believes in.
It's such a powerful act of defiance.
Yeah.
It challenges our own preconceived notions about what it means to be human.
Right. It makes you realize that humanity isn't just about biology.
Right.
It's about consciousness, empathy, the choices we make.
Exactly. And this idea of choice is so central to Villeneuve's work.
Yeah.
His characters are always faced with these difficult decisions, moral dilemmas
Right.
that force them to confront their values and beliefs.
Yeah.
And the choices they make, they ultimately define who they are.
It's a powerful reminder that we're not just, passive observers in our own lives.
Right.
We have agency. We have the power to make choices that shape our own destinies.
Right.
and impact the world around us.
And that's a hopeful message, isn't it?
It is.
Even in the face of adversity, we have the power to choose, to act, to make a difference.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've talked a lot about Villeneuve's, his Quebec roots, his love of the close-up, the themes he keeps coming back to, and those big, philosophical questions. His films make us ask about identity, technology, what it means to be human. But there's one thing we haven't really touched on yet. His knack for creating these worlds, these immersive, visually stunning worlds.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, his films, they're truly a feast for the senses.
Right.
He uses visuals, sound, even silence to draw you in, make you feel like you're right there in the heart of the story.
Yeah, and each film has its own distinct look and feel.
Absolutely.
Think about those desolate landscapes in A 12 Duc sur Terre, or the beauty of that alien spacecraft in Arrival.
Oh, yeah.
Or the neon-drenched, dystopia of Blade Runner 2049.
And it's not just about aesthetics either. His visuals, they always serve a purpose. They enhance the emotional impact of the story, add layers of meaning.
Yeah, like in Polytechnique.
Yeah, Polytechnique.
That stark black and white cinematography.
Right.
It reflects the coldness, the detachment of the shooter.
It does.
And the absence of music in that film.
Yeah.
It's so unsettling. It really ratchets up the tension.
It does. And then in Sicario, you have those wide angle shots and those long takes that they put you right in the middle of the action.
Yeah.
You feel the danger and the claustrophobia of the situations those characters are facing.
Yeah, you're practically holding your breath along with them.
Exactly. And then, you have Arrival where the visual design of the alien language, it's not just beautiful, it's integral to the story. Those swirling circular logogram, they reflect the alien nonlinear perception of time.
Right.
As Louise deciphers those symbols, we, the audience, were also being drawn into their way of experiencing the world.
It's amazing how visuals can communicate such complex ideas.
Right.
Almost like a language of their own.
It is. And Villeneuve, he's equally masterful with sound.
Yeah.
He uses sound effects and music to create atmosphere.
Right.
To build suspense, to heighten the emotional impact of key moments.
Yeah, like that haunting score in Blade Runner 2049.
Oh, yeah.
Or the deafening silence in Prisoners during those torture scenes.
Yeah, sometimes silence, it's even more powerful than any sound effect could be.
It creates anticipation, dread. You're hyper-aware of the character's emotional state.
Absolutely. It's another tool in Villeneuve's arsenal, and he uses it masterfully.
And it's not just sound and visuals, right? The way he uses space and movement, that also plays a big role in creating that immersive experience.
That's a great point. What do you have in mind?
Well, those long, slow tracking shots he often uses,
Oh, yeah, those are great.
they draw you into the scene. They allow you to observe the characters and the environment in such detail,
Okay.
and they create this sense of anticipation, like something's about to happen.
They do, like in Prisoners, those long, unbroken shots as the detective searches for the missing girls,
Yeah,
or the slow, deliberate movements of the characters in Sicario as they're navigating those dangerous streets of Juarez.
right.
You're just on edge the whole time.
Yeah, and even in his sci-fi films, where he's working with these fast, futuristic landscapes, he still manages to create a sense of intimacy
Right.
or claustrophobia when it serves the story.
Yeah, like in Arrival, the interior of that alien spacecraft, it's this massive otherworldly space,
Yeah.
but it also feels enclosed, oppressive. It reflects the characters' uncertainty and fear as they're encountering the unknown.
It's like he's this master puppeteer.
He is. He is.
He's playing with our emotions,
Yeah.
making us feel, small and insignificant one moment,
Right.
and I'm drawing us close and making us feel every heartbeat of the character's journeys the next.
He creates these worlds they're both awe-inspiring and unsettling.
Yeah.
He invites us to experience them on this visceral level.
It's not just watching a film, it's stepping into another reality.
It is.
And those realities, they stay with you long after the credits roll.
They do. They make you think, they make you question, they make you see the world in new ways.
And that's what great filmmaking is all about, isn't it?
It is. It is. It's about pushing boundaries, challenging our perceptions, and inviting us to see the world through a different lens.
So for our listener, if you haven't experienced Denis Villeneuve's films, I highly encourage you to seek them out.
Yeah.
They're more than just entertainment.
Right.
They're journeys of discovery. They're invitations to dive deep into the human condition.
And remember, as you watch his films, pay attention to those details we've talked about.
Yeah.
Those close-ups, the use of sound and silence, the way he uses space and movement to create atmosphere and tension.
Because those details are the keys to unlocking the richness of his cinematic worlds.
They are. They are. And as you explore those worlds, you might just discover something new about yourself in the process.
I love that. Well, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into Denis Villeneuve.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating journey.
It has. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And to our listeners, thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.